Yesterday, or the last lesson, we talked about the Battle of Trenton, where Washington defeated the British there in a raid battle that took place on the 25th and 26th of December in 1776. You may remember these images, or this map from that. We'll be coming back on that today because George Washington is going to return to Trenton, to the chagrin of the British. But the battle that we're going to talk about today is called the Battle of Princeton. You see it slowly loading here. This is an image of that battle. It's called George Washington rallying his troops at Princeton. You see the red jackets of the British in the background, and you see George Washington in the middle rallying the troops forward. And in truth, he did at one point. He was pretty close to the fighting in this battle and had a lot to say about that. But let's get this battle all set up. Let's talk about the Battle of Princeton. While it was fought on January 3rd, 1777, which takes us beyond the year 1776, this is the last battle in the campaign that started in 1776, and now all of the troops, British and American, go into winter quarters. Washington recrossed the Delaware in late December. This was another amazing crossing in winter weather, given that there was a winter storm on. Some of his troops had to crawl across the ice, but they could not get the cannon across that way, so they did have to get boats and pull them across that way, and the horses and so on. And they took up positions just outside Trenton. Cornwallis marched to Princeton first, and then he had 5,500 troops with him, and he divided his force and set out for Trenton. In his mind, it was going to be an easy job, but they were going to bag Washington. They were going to capture him and his army and end this all now. So the British march on to Trenton, and I told you I'd be coming back to the map, and here it is. Just going to take a quick glance at that. You see that there's a creek down here. Washington took up positions along the creek on this side and fought from there so that they could not be attacked from the other side. And the only way the British could get at him easily was to come across a bridge that was there, and they had that fairly well defended. So the British attacked 3 times. They're driven back each time, and then finally they call off attacks. It's been a longer day for them. Night was falling, and General Cornwallis decides to finish the battle in the morning rather than continue fighting at night. Washington, though, did what he often did. He quietly withdrew overnight. He had his forces leave their fires burning, and he left people behind to make it sound like they were in camp. But using whispered orders, they managed to sneak away one more time, and they got the British thinking that they were still there. The British, on the other hand, were allowed no fires. They were expected to sleep in the cold so that they could watch the colonists on the other side. Meanwhile, Washington took his forces and went to attack the British at Princeton. He surprised them as they were leaving Princeton, so he actually encountered them in a farmer's field and fought them for about 15 minutes. It was pretty ferocious fighting, but this was the main battle of the day. And it threw the British into retreat, and this is where Washington got right into the middle of it and was urging his troops on to catch up and take them, and then finally he had to hold them back because otherwise they would have been spread too thin. I do have another amusing little story that occurred this day. About 200 British soldiers had retreated to Princeton, and they chose the biggest building, strongest building there they could find, and they barricaded themselves in. This was a large stone hall, and it belonged to Princeton University. Captain Alexander Hamilton came up with his artillery and, recognizing where they were, got them all lined up, and he fired a shot at the building. Unfortunately, this was a stone building, and the first shot just glanced off the stone. So they got lined up and fired another shot. This one went into the building, and the story goes that it allegedly decapitated King George III, not the man, but a portrait inside. As a result, the British surrendered. Washington then withdrew his troops from Princeton to New Jersey, where they wintered. They spent the winter there. It was behind some mountains. It was relatively hard to attack, and so they could feel safe there. British could not easily attack there. General Cornwallis and the British, well, they left southern New Jersey for the winter. It had not been particularly productive to be there, and they withdrew so that they would not be attacked any further. So you wonder what the impact on the Revolutionary War struggle is of this last battle of this 76-77 season. Washington defeated the British, and with this victory, morale rose and more men began to enlist. He had been reduced more or less to all kinds of tactics to try to keep the men there that had been there. So he tried embarrassing them, he tried offering a bounty, and ultimately the Continental Congress stepped in and offered to pay a little bit more to keep people there, keep soldiers there too. But with this victory, more and more soldiers came to this cause and came to help, and that made a difference ultimately. And another impact was that the British withdrew from southern New Jersey altogether, and they quit planning any more military campaigns for that, or they started planning more military campaigns, but not for the winter yet, but for the summer and fall and spring to come. The toll of this battle, well, there were 25 Americans killed and 40 wounded. For the British, there were 100 killed, 70 wounded, and Washington had 280 prisoners to take care of. Here's another famous painting of George Washington inciting his troops, causing his troops to go forward and fight. And you see, don't see the British unless this is the British back here making a run for it. This is the last lecture before the test. Good luck on that test. And